I don't eject, and I hit that ditch, and I go up on a wing and knocks the bomb racks off, gear crumbles, goes up on about 90 degrees and comes back down. And for a second, I sit here and I look around. I go, okay, I'm still alive. Oh, and that is a fire. It is no kidding. Plane is on fire. And I saved the seat, run away bravely, and watch this OV-10 burn right there in front of me.
Tower, Delaware 6 is release you, runway 4 left, wind 040 at 5, clear for takeoff.
Seats high, altimeter 0 eyes, we're clear for takeoff, clear for the airspace. Viper check 2. My burn ramp curve was at 354. That's on. Next picture 16, 15,000, I'll give you some of that. Viper 1 target.
Deacon, thanks for joining me on the podcast. Excited to talk about you, your career, some flying stories and everything in between. So again, thanks for taking the time today.
You bet, Ray. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So kick it off with just a little bit about, if you give me the 60 to 90 second kind of elevator pitch, broad brush of who you are, where you've been, and what you're doing today. And then we'll jump back to the beginning after that. So,
okay. Yeah. Roy Deacon Qualls. I am currently a 777 pilot at a major airline. I was active duty Air Force for 10 years. I was in the Guard in New Orleans for another 16 years after that. Got hired, pretty spectacularly good deal. Got hired at an airline when right the day after my commitment was up. Did a year and a day on the panel, and then went on mill leave. A series of mill leave, voluntary furlough, deferred recall for 16 years, and then went back to the airline. Kept seniority intact and everything else. So hired at an airline in '99, but essentially stayed away for over 16 years, and then came back once I retired from the Guard.
Yeah, we definitely can dig into that a little bit. Non-standard, I think, for most people. And ironically enough, I've actually flown with several guys, similar circumstances to you, hired in that 2000 time frame when a lot of furloughs, a housing crisis, and ended up on mill leave, normally just limited to 5 years with some, there's some opposite caveats that go with that. But occasionally guys like yourself end away for a decade plus. And so, I guess you just never know how it's going to play out, but be interested in digging into that. Well, where did it all begin for you? What got you interested in the flying bug? What put you on the path to want to become a fighter pilot in the first place?
Yeah, it's almost an embarrassing story. But I went to an air show one day in Fort Worth. I was lifeguarding in between semesters of graduate school. And a buddy asked me to go to an air show at Carswell. So we went to the air show. And it's not like I had not grown up around aviation. I grew up a mile and a half from Naval Air Station Corpus Christi. So I've seen airplanes my whole life, and this was nothing new. But I saw that a couple days later, probably because I'd just seen an air show. I was in a bookstore, and I just browsing. I saw a book called The Gift of Wings by Richard Bach, who wrote a bestseller called Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which a lot of people have heard of. But I picked up A Gift of Wings, kind of some short stories, and one of them was called People Who Fly. And I read it, and it was intriguing to me. But I was eating ramen noodles and mac and cheese then. There's no way I had the money to get a pilot's license. And 2 days after that, the same buddy asked me if I wanted to go see a movie, and it was Top Gun. And I walked into the movie. I can point to this day, I can point to the second in Top Gun when I said, that's what I'm going to do. And I left the theater. It was in a strip mall, walked into the Navy recruiter's office that was next door. And I went bebopping in there like, man, he is going to be so glad to see me.
Yeah, naturally.
Hey, I'm Deacon, and I want to fly jets. And he just, shook his head. How much flying? He said, did you see Top Gun? I just walked out. He rolls his eyes. How much flying time do you have? Yeah, I've never flown anything in my life. And he said, this is a quote, dude, that's not how this works. And I just said, okay, well, how does it work? Is there a test? I test pretty good. So he set me up for a test, and when I left the Navy, I walked right next to the Air Force recruiter, and they're all in line there. I did skip the Army recruiter. Didn't know much, but I knew enough to do that, I thought at the time. So I went to the Air Force recruiter and had the same interaction. Same thing, give me a test. And it took a couple, 3 weeks, I think. And I got set up for tests. I took both of them, got offered pilot slots by both. And like 6 months later, I chose the Air Force. So then 6 months later, I'm flying a tweet.
Now, you say you got picked up for both for pilot slots. The story for most recruiters that I've heard and experienced, as I was doing air shows and talking to young people, right? that's usually not the path. Usually the story goes, yeah, you can be a pilot, but first you're going to be an X, Y, or Z, and it's going to be on the enlisted side of the house. This is a whole nother conversation in of itself,
Yep.
right? But like enlisting in the Air Force, enlisting in the service with the promise of being a pilot, for anyone who's thinking about do that, again, it can always change, but I throw caution to that, right? Recruiters, not all, like they're usually worried about a quota to fill, and they have
That's
that quota
exactly right.
set by, hey, we need X number of security forces or whatever. So they can always say, hey, yeah, you can do this. And yes, there are programs in the Air Force and the Navy to go from enlisted to officer to the pilot side. I think that's probably, it's much more difficult to do that versus ROTC, even the Air Force Academy. Going the OTS route is challenging, which I know is what you did. So,
Right.
yeah, you walked in the recruiter's office and ended up in pilot training. I'm going to venture to say that's a pretty rarity. Like the fact that you didn't end up listed. Like, did you have any essay on that? Was that even a factor, or like then, hey, we're going to put you on an officer?
I would say I was naive to the possibilities of recruiter, chicanery. I didn't really think about it, but I also went and said, I want to be a pilot. That was it. I didn't even open the door. They talked to me about ASVAB and then asked what that was, and I said, no, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I'm doing. Don't want to do that. So I was probably dogged enough that I wanted to be a pilot to maybe avoid some of that stuff. And I would have walked away from it that way too. I was prepared to go in. I want to be a pilot. I saw Top Gun. What's between me and being a pilot now? I know it all, right?
Yeah, probably the fact that just hard nosed with that probably saved you. And I say saved. I mean, that's a dramatic term, right?
And they didn't push me that way. I think I might have just closed that door before it ever opened.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, or blocked it before it ever opened further.
I'm
aware of that. I had recruiters that worked for me at the wing, and that was one of the things I told them when a kid comes in here. What he wants to do is what we're going to try to get him to do. We have quotas. We're looking for certain things, but let's try to fit these people in where they want to be.
Which is, ideally that's what you'd hope. Obviously, the needs of the Air Force, but if we can get someone doing a job that they want to do, then overall, that's probably going to be a better fit for everyone and a win overall. And I just say it too, right? Because my first reserve gig was working for the recruiting service. And in that time, I learned some things. I didn't know, like one, at least this is, I guess, 6 years ago, there were officer recruiters separate than the enlisted side, right? Then the average recruiter can do any of it, but then there were specific office recruiters. Then everyone thinks, oh, well, it's just a recruiter's a recruiter, but there's reserve recruiters, there's guard recruiters, there's active duty recruiters. They all kind of do the same thing, but also they're answering to different people and have different needs and different objectives.
Different incentives. And if I'd walked into a recruiting office, totally different. This just happened to be active duty, and it was.
This is
a lot of stars had to align.
Yeah, and that's why this is my long roundabout way. PSA is, obviously it's a great career, great profession. Just know what you're getting into, and then ask the questions and make sure you do it. We saw this happen while I was there. A young lady who had a chemical engineering degree, PhD in chemical engineering, and they discovered this while she was like halfway through basic training. And we all went up the 2-star. Like, how did we? And she was going to some career field that had nothing to do with chemical engineering. Like, this was probably not the right fit for her. We probably could have utilized her in a capacity, with research and development. And it turns out it took the 2-star involved to get her onto an OTS path and then into an engineering AFFC, where the Air Force could really utilize her skill set versus wherever that quota was filled when she signed on the dotted line. So, again, PSA, all I say is just
word of the wise. I'd say get a mentor. Have someone that's at least walking you through there. Someone that's been there.
All right, slight digression there, but super interesting the fact that, again, you ended up on that path, because it seems like the chances that they got derailed or just a little different, longer journey to the cockpit could have transpired there had you not, been so singularly focused on becoming a fighter pilot, which is cool to hear.
All right.
So you test, and you said 6 months later you're heading to a tweet.
Yeah. Well, flight screening program first. So if you didn't have a pilot's license at the time and you're going to officer training school, they sent you to flight screening program. They called it the T-41. It was a Cessna 172. I think you had 11 rides or something like that in there. Just long enough to find out if you're going to get airsick and can you learn at the pace that the Air Force teaches. They did morning stand-ups, just like we did in UPT. And really, they just want to put a little pressure on you, see how you react to pressure, and then make sure you weren't getting airsick. And then officer training school for 3 months after that, and then Reese Air Force Base, Class 9005.
Man, your timing was really good. At least it seems like with this. Then now again, we'll talk about later. These guys I've flown with who were out for 10, 15 years on mill leave. Everyone in that post-Desert Storm time frame, like a year or two later,
the bathtub,
ended up in the bank program. So it sounds like your timing was like you were just right ahead of this wave.
I was just barely ahead. While I was at Langley, we had our first bank pilot show up, and of course, we didn't know we had no idea what that meant. We thought he was a new kid out of RTU, and then he knows I'm a bank pilot. What? Yeah, the Air Force promised me a fighter in 3 years. Oh, okay. Hold your breath.
Again, another moral story here is like right place, right time, or wrong place, wrong time. You just never know how it's going to pan out here. But landing not in the bank program seems like a win. Just again, you were just ever so slightly ahead of that curve there, which is awesome to hear. How was pilot training for you? How was the RTU? Obviously, seems like it went pretty well because you landed an Eagle, but dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, so pilot training, the problem with pilot training for me was I never worried about graduating. I just wanted to make sure I got a tactical airplane, right? And so the good news is my roommate was a class behind me, and so we weren't competing. He wanted to fly fighters. We weren't competing against one another, and so we could study. We would study together. We would prep together. He had the benefit of me being ahead of him to tell him what was coming up and that kind of stuff, but that helped. But I didn't find. Pilot training wasn't the funnest time of my life. I've had a great time. How can you not have fun? Yeah. Solo in a T-38, and it was fun. But I found it another underlying stress because I wanted to fly. I wanted to fly fighters. I got assigned on assignment. I got an OV-10 to Shaw Air Force Base. I graduated. I was the top grad that was assignable. So our number one, the Commander's Trophy, winner of the Commander's Trophy, great guy named Mark Case, F-16 guy, certainly deserved the Commander's Trophy. He was a reserve guy, and then I was the next graduate after that. And I think because I had A-10 as my first choice, I think that's why I got an OV-10 and maybe not a Viper and Eagle, which was I think I had A-10, Viper, Eagle. I think F-111s are still around,
Yeah.
But look, I was delighted. I can still remember Simon night, and I can still get chills just thinking about it. Sometimes, I'll can't sleep overnight, and Narita or whatever. I'll be scrolling through YouTube and run against some assignment night videos, and you can see the utter joy in these kids' faces. They find out what they're flying, and it brings me all back. So I did OV-10s for a year. They were drawing down OV-10s at Shaw, and I got a chance to go do Eagles. So I was there for a year in Shaw for a year and a day. Then I went to RTU down in Tyndall.
The OV-10 pipeline at that time, is that one of those platforms where they would pull from various weapon systems? So you'd have a mix of guys.
It was an alpha tour, right? So you had my flight commander was an F-16 guy. Most of the flight commanders were previous fighter guys. You'll appreciate this. This squadron had 26 lieutenants in it and 21 single lieutenants. It was, and there was 2 squadrons of these guys around. And then there's a Shaw, so there's 3 Viper squadrons. So you can imagine what a Friday night at the Oak Club looked like.
My God.
It was chaos, but it was fun. It was a great time. I ended up in the desert for 3.5 months on the ground. That wasn't the funnest time of my life. Looking back on it, I wouldn't change it for anything. But nonetheless, the year I had at Shaw was, and then just the sheer amount of responsibility you get as a second lieutenant. I can remember my first red flag, or maybe an air warrior or something, out at Nellis, clock map ground on a 1 to 250 map, going out to the ranges there west of Greenland, facking for live drops. The A-10s just got lasty. They had dropping live on some of these targets. And I'm out there as a, I don't know, 25-year-old second lieutenant shooting Willie Pete rockets and, directing traffic. It was a lot of fun. And it learned an awful lot even in that short time I flew.
I imagine, yeah, you'd have to. Because you said, through that, you got through a forward air controller upgrade, which that's a complex mission set. There's a lot of dynamic things that are going on when you're dealing with guys on the ground getting shot at and coordinating airplanes to drop ordnance.
Right. And at the time,
a lot of moving pieces.
And at the time, the lead up to that was, after UPT, you go to lift at Holloman, and we did, some 9 lines from the T-38. It was a lot of fun. It was busy, but it was a lot of fun. It was certainly a lot of moving pieces, but an awful lot of fun, and had great leadership in that first squadron too. So lucky to come right out of the chute and get leaders who are just so airman focused. Ken Alley and Cajun McConnell, Kunas McConnell were the squadron commander DO, and man, what a great pair of leaders.
As guys left that, you mentioned all those lieutenants. Did most guys go on to other fighter systems?
They all did. You bet. And so Shaw was going to OV-10s at the time, and then a lot of guys were just ready to get out of South Carolina, or at least ready to get out of Sumter, South Carolina. That might have flown the A-10 somewhere else, but they go, yeah, I think I'll try it, give somewhere else a shot. So they did it just by rank. The highest ranking guy that was leaving got his first choice of available airplanes, and most of the guys, because we were doing forward air control, we all wanted to go to Vipers, and because I was not juniors, or I was just younger.
Yeah.
I was going to get I could take a Viper, but it'd take me there. I was going to stay there for about 9 months waiting. And my flight commander, who was a Viper guy, says, Deacon, take an Eagle and run. Get out of here. He goes, I've never met an Eagle guy that regretted it. You'll be glad you did it in a month.
Yeah.
And sure enough, guys that were more senior to me in that squadron that stuck around ended up getting delayed. And some of them actually gave up waiting for the Viper and came to the Eagle as well. So again, just good advice from a flight commander. So just get out of here, take your Eagle and go do it. And so I did.
Yeah, that's one of those things too. Like that, I wonder if it might have played out differently. It's like what's the best airline? I always hear guys like the first one that hires you.
Right.
You just don't know what's going to happen. Like again, the needs could change overnight, and now all of a sudden we got too many pilots, and now you're ending up being banked. So. OV-10 story. I think you at least had at least one kind of sporty situation in an OV-10. As I read on your bio, I'd like to hear about that story in Nellis.
Yeah, you bet. So the shorter version of it, and I can expound on it wherever you want me to. It was February of '91, I suppose, and I think we're doing an Air Warrior exercise. So, and I am facking for some A7s. So that tells you how long ago it was. Out in the western ranges. Don't remember what they're called. Remember, we were near Death Valley. And on the way home, well, my roommate had just had the earlier vol, and we kind of crossed paths as I was going in. But on the way, essentially on the way, so I faxed some A7s, have a grand time doing it. Again, second lieutenant, alone and unafraid. Hair on fire, and on the way home, I'm still west of Mount Charleston, about 12,000 feet, when I get a no kidding firelight and a visible fire on the number 2 side. So I shut it down. I don't remember what the process is in an OV-10, but I think we had a handle up here. You pull, and there's probably some levers and cranks, and feather the engine, and the fire goes out. Feather the prop, and now the question is, can I make it over Mount Charleston, because that's in between me and either McCarran or Nellis. And I start looking, I've got my map out, and the nearest suitable landing field, if I can't make it over Mount Charleston, there's a brothel with a 3,000 foot strip, and that's where I'm going to land. And part of me still wishes that I had not made it over the mountain, because you'd be going, oh, you're the brothel guy. Okay.
Right.
But I made it over Mount Charlie by about 500 feet. And when I start talking to McCarran, I'm closer to McCarran than I am to Nellis. I've got still have some live Willie Pete's on board and some BD-33s. And so I decided not to overfly the city of Las Vegas. I don't really know what's wrong with my plane. And McCarran was not at all happy to see me. I check in, call sign was Mako. They're landing to the west. I'm coming in from the west, headed east. So first of all, they say, "Hey, can you go to Nellis?" I go, "No, I can't go to Nellis." And I think I'm a second lieutenant this time, maybe a first lieutenant, but coming in, I'm not going to go to Nellis. Well, can you land to the west? We're landing on runway 25 or whatever the west runway is now.
Yeah.
I said, "No, I'm landing on 07. It's, I don't know, 12,000 feet long, 200 feet wide. I need about 700 feet of it. I could probably I'd probably land sideways on it if I had to." So now they give me holding instructions. Okay, Mako 81, hold west of field 30, 10-mile leg. So no, not doing that. And then as I get a little bit closer, they say, "Can you take runway 01, or do you have to have 07? And I think about it for a minute. I say, "I want 07. Then I say winds. And when I say winds, they come back with this. Here's exactly what they say. "Okay, into 07. So I think they're saying, I thought they said the winds were 120 at 7 or negligible. I'm not going to worry about winds. I said, "Okay, then if winds aren't a factor, I want runway 7. I get to about 50 feet over the overrun, and in the Bronco, you don't drop your gear single engine until you're ready to land, because you're going to land once you do it. All right. Okay. So I've got an engine out, pretty good. They were counter-rotating engines, but pretty good torque with that propeller off to the side. They had some pretty good crab and everything else. And as soon as I went wing low, pretty quick, I had a stick in my lap and a full boot of rudder, and I'm still drifting off the runway. And I realized I'm not going to land on the runway. There is a paved area south of 25 left, I think it is. And I hitting that paved area, but it's actually a bit of a swell like this. And the right wing and the left wheel kind of touch at the same time because of the swell. And the mishap report says the left tire was liberated from the airplane. That's an interesting verb, but okay, we'll go with it. I almost liberated something in my flight suit after that, but we went. I go sliding across the desert, south of the infield, south of McCarran, away from the terminal, and then there's another ditch coming up, and I put my hands on the ejection seats, almost pulled the trigger. Had a good 0-0 seat, but at that where I am right now, I don't have a whole lot. Everything's got to work. A million miracles. I got to go off exactly right. So I don't eject, and I hit that ditch, and I go up on a wing and knocks the bomb racks off. Gear crumbles, goes up on about 9 degrees and comes back down. And for a second, I sit here and I look around. I go, okay, I'm still alive. Oh, and that is a fire. It is no kidding. It is on fire now. I think I may have sent you some of the pictures or a video, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. Plane is on fire. And I saved the seat, run away bravely, and watch this OV-10 burn right there in front of me. There's an ambulance that come out and said, "Hey, we need to check you out." I go, "I'm fine." They said, "No." They drugged me in the ambulance and they do a blood pressure check, and they said, "That can't be right." They do it again. They said, "Your blood pressure is 220 over 140. I said, "Just give me 2 minutes, maybe 3. It'll go down, I promise you." It was just chaos. Airport manager crossed the runway without getting tower permission, and DC-10 on a short final goes around. It was utter chaos. Cats and dogs living together. Just everything. It turns out, so what we discovered later on is that the winds were actually 360 at, I think it was 20 gust 30, which is outside of an OV-10. You can't land at 2 engines. I forgot exactly what the limits are, but it was outside the limits. Took a while for everyone to figure out that because they were checking the winds at the 2 miles away at the east side of the airport when I was landing on the west side. But they finally figured that out later on in the cab recordings. It's not on the radio tapes, but on the the CVR, if you will, for the tower. As I'm sliding across the infield, you hear the tower chief go, "Oh, expletive. We didn't give him the winds," as I'm sliding across the infield there. Yeah. So then that was I flew. That was February. I flew for another 8 months, I guess, before I went to RTU at Eagle.
How long were you out? What was your next flight? I guess how long were you down for after that?
Maybe 4 days, 5 days. I flew again at. I think I did an Air Warrior sortie. I think.
Yeah.
I certainly flew home from there if I didn't.
Yeah.
So it wasn't long after, and I was ready to go. I remember I don't know, man. Our training is so good. I just feel like our training is so good. I remember the board president he said, "Were you really that calm on the radio, or was that fake?" And the truth is, I just didn't have time to be. No, later on, that night was a little bit sleepless. Did a little tossing and turning, but I think the training. I think the training that we received, how to handle emergency in general. It's not like I prepped for this particularly, but just how to handle emergency in general. Donnie Hudson was my tweet IP, and I'll never forget the first day of tweets. He tells me, "Take out a pen." Me and my table mate. He says, "Write these down. First steps to handle aircraft emergency." And he said, "Step 1, maintain aircraft control. Step 2, maintain aircraft control. Step 3," and he went through, and everything focused on that. Then he went back to analyze situation, and back to, and so I don't think I really had time to be scared until later. But I did have some sleepless nights for a while after that, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. Like in the moment, right? Like I haven't had an emergency that significant, right? But the things that I have had go wrong, I was like, oh, boom, there's a master cautioner. And like, it's just kind of like, I've seen this a million times in the sim, and I guess you're just working. I got to work through this problem first. I don't have time to think about how this is.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That is the other interesting aspect of that is the ejection seat, the rationale that goes behind it. And this is one of the things that I've never seen it written down, right? But these are the philosophical questions that guys talk about in the squadron, at least that I experienced was, if you have some kind of emergency on the ground and you're sliding off the runway or departing the prepared surface, like when would you pull the handle and go? And F-16, my logic kind of became, after seeing mishaps, was like, if I'm, maybe it's right or wrong, if I'm in a slow jog and I'm going to go off the runway, like I'm probably going to pull the handle, because when you start looking around an airfield and the ditches and the hills, like it's something you don't really think about. You're like, I don't want to go off-roading in an F-16, even at 12 knots or 15 knots. Snap a gear, roll, now you're pinned in the jet, like just all those things. Now you don't have an ejection option as you sit there and burn in the plane, so it's like that's the most extreme scenario. But
I agree. And in the Eagle, that was my plan, was always I was not going to go off-road in an Eagle, thin gear, just not, no one knows what happened. I had a lot of faith in the seat. I think with the Bronco, it was more of, no one was more surprised than me to be sliding across the desert floor and not exactly on the center line. So by the time I thought about ejecting, I probably only had about 30 or 40 knots on the airplane, and kind of slide sideways. And it was some quick calculus, no doubt, and ultimately, obviously, I made the right choice. But it went up when I hit that. When I tell you, I went up on a wing. I mean, I went up pretty good. It got my attention. I can envision being that, and I don't know if you played back, if you had the ability to look back, like, well, that bank, was it 10 degrees or 15 degrees? And the only ways I'm going with this is I've watched, when I did my safety stuff, having to watch some HUD tapes with landing things in particular, that when you see the HUD playback, you're like, dude, there's no way I would have stayed with that. Right.
But in all reality, it was 10 or 15 degrees of bank, low to the ground, and it just looked, and I would imagine it felt in the jet very significant as well. But again, easier to look back on it. You're just like, things can just go sideways really quick.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't work out. But
okay, I think God was watching over me that day, because things certainly could have gone you know, much, much worse, you know. And I walked away from it a little sore, a little, you know, back hurt for a while, a little whiplash. But we went to the casinos. Me and my roommate went to the casino that night. He said, let's find out if this is the luckiest day of your life because you walked away, or you're unluckiest because you had a crash. And we actually had a pretty good night there at we stayed right across the street. In those days, we stayed literally right across the street from the Mirage at a Comfort Inn or something silly back then, 1992. Yeah, I think there was a Comfort Inn across from the Mirage.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, the Bronco days, a lot of cool things are happening, but really the vast majority of your career in the Eagle. So let's jump into the early part of your Eagle career and talk with B course, first assignment. But I'd like to kind of know that time frame. You know, again, I'm kind of envisioning coming out of the Cold War, coming out of Desert Storm, tactics, thought processes, I imagine are probably changing and transforming as you guys are now dealing with Kosovo and things like that. But talk about those early days in the Eagle, because you obviously can compare it to the latter part of your career as well.
Right. Look, by that time, I still get chills thinking about it, man. I just can remember every time I put on a jet, OV-10, T-37, it didn't matter what it was. I always felt so lucky to be where I was, doing what I was doing. And so I'm at RTU at Tyndall with a bunch of good dudes, A models. There's 3 of us lieutenants living on the beach in Mexico Beach, on the water, you know, literally a house on the water. If we weren't the mayor of Mexico Beach, we thought we were. We lived right underneath the initial reporting point. I can remember being out on a hammock on the back porch with watching the water with eagles showing up for initial. At least I was wise enough then to know I'm probably not going to live like this again for a while. maybe ever. So in that background of just, single lieutenants living on the beach, going to RTU, I found it challenging, but I did well. I was a distinguished graduate of RTU, and we're flying A models, A models with no chaff or flares, right? So they put a chaff bundle underneath our speed brake, so you get one deployment of chaff, which I usually expended upon the rejoin out of traffic. So it was, AIM 7s.
Now, was the chaff deployed via opening the speed brake? Is that
absolutely? They would lift it up. This you almost can't believe it that this jet, the A model original,
I had no idea.
did not have DSAs, no chaff, no flares, almost unbelievably.
Just knew it was going to win, So it was like,
yeah, I guess so. That's right. What's this defensive stuff you're talking about? But that was 6 months. Had a great time, enjoyed it. But it was, no helmet, no fiddle, no gogs. It was very basic F-15. And then I had an assignment to KEF after that until they figured out you couldn't go to KEF unless you already had 500 hours of Eagle time. So when they figured that out, I got just put on casual status there, and I got to fly Red Air, for about 6 months as just a Red Air.
Was that because because it was purely alert?
Well, KEF, just because I've flown at KEF a lot since then on TDYs. Right. KEF is full contact karate, man. The weather goes bad quickly. You'll have a 3,000-pound bingo and soft. I still sweat thinking about being soft at KEF because things would change so rapidly. So you got a 4-ship airborne, 3,000-pound bingo, like a 1,500-pound bingo for you guys over the field. And the next thing the weather just goes completely south. They're scrambling a tanker, which was always on alert. And next thing you know, you hear, okay, the bingo is 13,000 pounds over the field. We're launching the tanker, and Lucas is the alternate.
So, yeah. And I guess we should mention Keflavik for those who are not familiar, right? But we're always sending jets up there. Did you say 13,000-pound bingo?
Yeah, I think it's been 2004 is my last time, but I think that's what they would get because Lucas is the nearest alternate.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll give you a 20% margin of error on that number. That's still a significant amount of gas.
Yeah, it was more, and thank God. Look, I only had the KC-135 guys have to launch once, but when they did, it was ugly, ugly weather. And they bring you back to arrested landings. The coefficient of friction would get so low in the runways that they would just bring you back into the cable and slingshot you out. You clear the runway, another guy takes off. Yeah, I used to laugh when it go to Kef because you've done flight walks where you get out there and everyone's I found a micro rock they put down. You're taking all that kind of stuff. Well, at Kef, there's a guy whose name is the company's called Snow King, I think is what it is. And Snow King, among other things, when you have to taxi out to the runway if the mews are down low, the friction's low enough, he comes out in a pickup truck with spray bars out the side, dropping crushed lava rock in front of you. So, and that's just so you can taxi, so you don't slide all over the place. So, we'd lock the ramps up in the Eagle. You didn't have that luxury in the Viper. We lock the ramps up so they're not pointed down while we're taxiing. Yeah. We taxi out and do it. And I can remember one time taking the runway. I'm number 4, so we're going to do a 4 in the slot. And they're already lined up, and we're all going slow. And I start to turn. I hit the nosewheel steering to turn, and I just keep going the way I was going, straight. So luckily there's this civilian ramp on the other side. So I said, I'll be back in a minute. Slid across the runway, turned back around, gave myself a little better angle at it the next time. But Kef was busy. Kef would keep you, but also weather canceled. I was there at the time I spent Kef, 3 months total. 9 of those weeks were in the middle of the winter. Gets light at 2 in the morning, dark at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You weather cancel a lot of days. The squadron bar was in the dorm, the WIF, just a great piece of aviation history. So it was a lot of fun. It was definitely a lot of fun. Did a low level out of Greenland one time out of Kef. That was just amazing.
So I've only flown over it, in a big old fat plane. Looking down, like, it looks amazing. I wouldn't want to end up in the water or end up on Greenland because it looks rather cold.
Right.
But I want to jump back because you kind of glossed over this piece, but the arrested landings, right? So, we have a hook on all Air Force fighters for emergencies. The time I took a cable was at New Orleans, of all places. But it's a significant emotional event for an Air Force guy to take a cable. Navy's doing it all day long. Their choice, not ours. But so like the runway condition being so poor because of the ice and snow, you guys would have to take cables on occasion. Is that what I understood?
Yeah, and I think I only did it once. It was an in-flight guide, and I don't remember all the rules, but I think it was 10-mile separation. You'd come down, you take the approach-in cable. They do the slingshot kind of to get you out, so it's real quick getting you out, taxiing clear, and bring the next guy in. I mean, I don't remember all the details of it, but it was in the in-flight guide as an eventuality. To also include, you have that some of the stuff we deal with on polar routes. You have some of the stuff if the altimeter's too low. Now the softs get involved, reading the altitude. You have to change the altitude to correct for the low barometric pressure. That was an issue. I only saw that once, but I did see that once. I wasn't soft at the time, and I wasn't flying at the time. But so that's why they wanted experienced guys only at Kef, because it could be a handful.
Yeah, that sounds like that'd be a handful, from lava rocks to taking cables just to land it and slingshotting yourself out of the cable. No big deal.
Right.
What the mission up there, man, I imagine you guys are flying a lot of continuation training, so just normal ops, obviously in much different environment. But the reason you're there is for alert and stopping the Russians from flying over. Were you guys, is that a correct assumption there?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was, the bear bomber threat back in the day. And when Kef was permanent party there up until the early 90s, I think, I think they were on 5-minute alert. And they routinely scrambled on bears. And after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the USSR, then when I was there, we were on 12-hour alert, which is the kind of alert you want to be on, because you can literally be in Reykjavik sipping a Bloody Mary and have the time we were on beepers and have a beeper because you're 12 hours away. Now, I forgot what year it was, but Louisiana, we were deployed up there. And got the first Bear bomber intercept in about a decade. And they saw it come from a long way away. The guys had time to get ready. They launched out obviously sooner than 12 hours, but we actually had one of the first Bear, or actually the first Bear bomber intercept, and I think it was over a decade. Don't quote me on any of this stuff, but it had been a long time. But that was what it was. It was just awareness. My last trip there in 2004, right before I got there, the group of Louisiana guys that were there got stuck on 5-minute alert because a Russian aircraft carrier parked off the northeast coast of Iceland, and now they're doing a poopy suit alert, if you can imagine.
That sounds like just absolute misery.
Yeah, I can only imagine, because when we got there, about 2 days before I got there, they pulled it off, and it went. I think it was Kuznetsov class aircraft carrier or something. It left.
Okay.
It left, and we were back to 12-hour alert again, which is the kind of alert I want to be on.
5-minute alert. That's no joke. I didn't even think about the whole poopy suit thing. Obviously, if you're on a 5-minute alert flying in Keflavik, you're wearing a poopy suit.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Oh.
And the new styles, with the zip across the.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can only imagine. I hated wearing those anytime, but I can't imagine. And I think they swapped out every 6 or 8 hours or something. But still,
That's just misery. I mean, my joke was, being South Carolina, where some days in the wintertime it's 75 degrees as you're stepping into the jet. So I mean, wearing that thing, you're just sweating like crazy. Then you go out over the water. Mm-hmm. So God forbid you need it. The water's going to be cold. But I was like, I would be the unfortunate one that I'd have used my pillow pack. I didn't zip the thing back up. So I'd be miserable on the ramp, angry all the time, punch out, and then die of exposure because I didn't zip the thing all the way back up or something. So.
Yeah, we wore them when I was at Langley. We wore them. I always said it drained about 30% of the joy out of flying for me, just having to put one on, and
that's a baseline. You start at a minus 30% joy.
Right. And
I think you said you listened to Fester's episode. Fester was using the piddle pack right before his engine rolled back. I was like, good on you. Right. Zipping that thing up, I mean, survival instincts, I suppose, but not where you want to be.
Yeah. Now I listened to Fester's episode. What a great story that was.
Yeah, not where you want to be.
No. And I thought about it when I was flying over to. I think I was going to Incheon, flying over down south the Aleutians. I went, no.
Get some big old waves, a lot of cold water. Sitting in a dinghy for hours, it's just, again, not where we want to be. So fortunate, never had to do that. But hearing his story, again, it's just wild. But the Keflavik piece, I can imagine, again, that would have been a cool experience. Again, something that you don't really do. And obviously the Arctic's gained a lot of attention lately in the last couple of weeks when it comes to it. But, from even... Yeah, like you said, hey, haven't really intercepted a Bear bomber in a decade. I would believe that stat's probably pretty correct, but obviously the last 5 or 6 years, that's ramped up, and there's been some pretty wild videos of obviously Chinese, Russian fighters and bombers interacting in and amongst coalition forces there, NATO forces. So
I think it's got more. I think it's got more exciting there in Iceland in the recent years. Like I said, the last time I was there was 2004. So my recency of experience is not great there, but I'm sure it's gotten a lot more. They're probably not in Cafe Reykjavik nursing whatever you nurse in Iceland. I know it's expensive. It's an expensive beer. I don't know what brand it is, but it's an expensive one.
Yeah. Well, so you get detour, or you get sent, I guess, basically casual there because you don't have the hours. But the 90s there for your Eagle time. Any Operation Allied Force? Doing any of that, or I did Desert Storm on the ground after. I always want to caveat it. I got there after the ground war ended, so I was living with the 3rd Armored Division, I think it was, in Iraq, in Southern Iraq. Me and 5 Air Force guys, trying not to get bullied by the Army. I did that while I was with the TAS, the OV-10s, and then. At Langley, did two Southern Watch rotations. Okay.
Or 3, 2 or 3. I think it's probably two. Did two Southern Watch rotations while I was at Langley. The second one was, I think in 93 or 94, Saddam moved some troops south again. So half our squadron was over there. We're down to just 12 jets. I'd been the year before, so I didn't have to go. And then, no kidding, we got that call, that middle of the night call that, hey, pack your bag, we're heading over. And we launched out, I think it was the next day, or actually I'm sure it was the next day, launched out. And so now we had all 24 jets over there. But it was mostly, I'm sure you've done Southern Watch or Northern Watch, or it was mostly capping. I like to fly night vols because it was so hot in the summer that at least the night it was down to 100 as opposed to 120 or whatever it was. So living at Cobar Towers there before the one blew up. And then I think the next year, later we went to PSAB maybe. That's a place, isn't it? Yeah, Prince Sultan Air Base.
It is, yeah.
So Cobar Towers twice, PSAB once, and then and that was active duty. Then I went to Northern right after 9/11. We deployed to Incirlik for Northern Watch.
And taking 24 jets again. That's something that well, I think we've seen recently, but up until the very recent times, it's not normally a normal thing to take basically the full squadron allocation of jets to one spot. A lot of wild times transpiring in the last 12, 18 months or so where it's kind of brought that back. But that's a significant movement.
Yeah.
24 jets.
It was. And, I've been really proud to see the stuff that the United States aviation, arm of military aviation has done some incredible stuff in the last couple of months. It's been pretty impressive. I've been pretty impressed watching it all.
Well, and same, right? There's a lot of politics involved and a lot of noise out there. And if people can remove their, I guess, feelings and politics for a minute and just think about from a capability standpoint,
exactly,
of what was accomplished in Operation Midnight Hammer, stuff that's going on in Rough Rider, Venezuela. Again, remove the politics from it and what you feel about it. You're like, dude, it's pretty impressive when you look at how complex these environments are and how dangerous these environments are. We're like, yeah, no, we want to do this. We're going to go do that. Like that, you cannot disagree that that's impressive. I don't think.
I agree. Again, absent the politics or anything else, just what was demonstrated. It reminded me of, do you ever do a maple flag or we had I did three maple flags, and we'd always start.
No. So I was a shawl guy. There's no good deals.
No,
right?
okay. All right, I hear you. They always you always start with a capabilities brief, just an unclassified capabilities brief. Maple flag always had some international flyers up there, and my buddy tells a story. This big, tall German squadron commander stands up, like for the Eagles. You say, "Hey, I'm Deacon with the Eagles. We're going to be a 6x2 loadout. We can stay airborne for 40 minutes. We'll be looking at 60, launching at 40 or whatever. Just a real simple brief." And this guy stands up and says, "I'm Uwe with the Luftwaffe. We are flying GL-1 Tornadoes. Our capabilities are unmatched." And and that's what I thought of when I saw the Midnight Hammer, the Rough Rider, and everything else. Is if anything else, it demonstrates our capabilities are unmatched. And
100%.
Yeah, really, really proud of and a little bit jealous of the opportunity those guys and gals have had.
Yeah, they got to go do it. I think hindsight, a little bit jealous for sure. Leading into it, I mean, at least for me, I think, Midnight Hammer in particular, right? That's one you're like, don't know how this one's going to shake out. I imagine there's going to be a couple losses here or there, right? So again, right. A testament to, again, the capability, the airmanship, the planning, all the factors that go in to make that happen. It's more than just pilot in a jet, which that's a key part, right? But cyber, there's space, there's the full might of the United States intelligence and defense, entities coming together to make that happen. Again, it's impressive when we say go. So slight digression there. Yeah, like I again reading bio. 9/11's happened right smack dab, basically in the middle of your career. So I would like to dig into that. And I know 9/11 specifically, if we can talk about that day, what was transpiring in your world, and then maybe how that kind of transformed, the latter part of your career and how it shaped it. So I would like to kind of jump into,
Sure.
9/11, 7 a.m. in the morning. Where's Deacon? What's going on that day?
We're night flying, so I'm not going to go until 10 or 11, or 1 or 2 o'clock is the plan. So I'm at home, and believe it or not, I actually hear on the radio that a plane has hit the World Trade Center. And I thought, like most people did, what moron flew into the World Trade Center? I'm thinking a small plane, and I'm having coffee, and all of a sudden, as I recall, I think I watched the second one hit live, while I'm watching. And as soon as I saw that, I realized, like Andy Card told George Bush down in Florida, we're under attack. And I literally jump up, put on a flight suit, grab a mob bag, and before I'm out the door, I've got a call from the squadron. It's how soon can you get here? And again, I'm in the Guard. Most of our guys, the vast preponderance of our guys are part-timers, and they're gone. I was on military leave from the airlines at the time. So I leave my home, which is 2 miles the crow flies, but 7-mile drive from Naval Air Station, New Orleans. And I'm going about 100 miles an hour down the road to the base. And I get there. And of course, the fog of war is alive and well. No one really knows what's going on. At the front gate, there's a line, and I just get out and I get on the grass and I pass the line, and they're checking a beer truck. They got the the dental mirrors looking at a beer truck, and the guy hops out, says, "Hey, you can't bypass that, dude. I need to get in. We're gonna go launch. I need to get in here." He goes, "Well, we got to check everybody." I go, "I get it. Just check some people before you check the beer truck." And finally, a supervisor came out and convinced them that, yeah, let's let this guy through. So we get out there, and our wing commander had already had him. We weren't sitting alert. New Orleans was not an alert site on 9/11. It had been cold for a while. So wing commander had them start loading live missiles up just kind of proactively, I should say, which is a good call. President Bush went to Barksdale. I don't know if you remember that, but he landed in Shreveport and went to Barksdale when he first addressed the nation. I'm watching him talk. There's only 4 pilots there. That's it. Everyone else is gone, and or still in MQT or something. And I'm watching him talk. And I said, "Hey, I think we're the closest fighters to Barksdale." So I'm gonna start putting on my gear. So I go put on my G suit and my harness. And as I do that, NORAD calls just on our ops line, says, "We need your classified fax number." I said, "We don't have, our command post is not open. We don't have a classified fax that anyone's manning. So I'll give you the fax we use to send our schedule to the Navy every day." So I gave it to them, and they faxed me. I think I may have sent you a picture of it. If I didn't, I can. But I have it here. This is a copy of the classified rules of engagement. It's been declassified. You can see it on the top. Yeah. Secret rail can, releasable to Canada. And he says, if you've ever looked at it, it says this on it. I'm sure you've looked at many ROE as I have. That's lawyerese and 2 pages long, and the wreckage has got to fall on the right side of the line, all that kind of stuff. But this says the vice president has authorized you to intercept targets of interest and shoot them down if they don't respond. And like period, end quote. You go, wow, that's pretty direct. So they said, "Well, just get ready. We're going to call you." This is NORAD again. And so we start briefing up a little bit. There was 2 of us were airline guys. One was a FedEx guy. Squadron commander was there, and our patch wearer was there, not airline guys. And Randy, the squadron commander, looked at us and goes, "Hey, I need to know if you can do this. You can shoot down an airliner if you have to." It was a very poignant moment, just surreal to see that in writing. This is what you're supposed to do. So, I don't know, 10 minutes later maybe, NORAD called and said, "Launch everything you can get airborne that has missiles on it and go find Air Force One." And so, 4 30/40-something guys go running to the flight line, probably further than I'd run outside of a PT test in a while. So the check-in was kind of funny, Rain. It was like, jazz check. There was a lot of heavy breathing, and it wasn't a really crisp Thunderbird check-in.
Yeah.
But we launch out. AB climbs up to 17 grand. Switch over to Houston and say, hey, Jazz requests flight level 440 and heading about 330. And they said, any altitude, any airspace. Airspace is yours. No one else is airborne. They said, if you're looking for someone, essentially gave us a vector to Air Force One. So we head that way with some pretty good cutoff, and I think I don't want to make it more dramatic than it was. I think we're still 40 or 50 miles away when I think Carswell, someone else got there before we did. Some Vipers did, either out of Carswell or maybe they escorted him had been with him the whole time. But so they turned us around. We split into a two-ship, capped over New Orleans and Houston. Came home, landed, tried to get some sleep, and then launched out that night again over Houston. By that time, I think they might have had some tankers airborne, but we were doing two-ship caps over Houston. We got vectored from air defense on a target that I think was someone that heard us, our own jet noise. So we're over Houston, capping 20 grand. We both got full tanks, and they said, hey, we've got a report of a plane to the southwest y'all about 40 miles. And I'll never forget, the guy goes, confirm you have the ROE. What he was saying was, if someone's airborne and you can't talk to them, you need to shoot them down. So to get rid of the radar footprint problem, we dropped down to 500 feet over downtown Houston, 500 feet, 500 knots on GOGs. And we put 2 Code 1 Eagle radars on them. There was nothing down there. In retrospect, I think someone heard our jet noise and thought it was someone else. But that was an eye-opening moment when you're.
Yeah, and I guess that too. I was thinking, if someone's hearing that, just for those who weren't around because they were born after that fact, and people listen to the podcast, that's the case. Or I was like, my first flight ever was September 10th, 2001. And I remember going out to the airport the next day, right? And it's a small local airport, right? But there were 3 police cars. 2 were sitting on the runway, and then 1 was sitting up by the FBO. But it's like in that time period, no one knew what was next. And literally, police cars sitting on the runway to make sure that no one would take off. And again, just didn't know. The procedures weren't there. They weren't in place. It was so unprecedented. Everyone's just obviously on key.
Yeah, it was completely unprecedented. You just, there was still a lot of chaos, man. The fog of war exists. I know you've seen it, and it was no one really sure what was going on or who knew. And we'd scramble. We've been sitting alert essentially nonstop at New Orleans since 9/11. And early on, we would get a ton of scrambles, just off of the smallest things. Just something didn't look right. We scrambled on some. I didn't, but we scrambled on some Mylar balloons out of a backyard birthday party in Mexico. There was a lot of itchy trigger fingers early on.
Yeah. What was going through your mind with thinking through shooting, the possibility of having to shoot down an airliner?
I think we were all, again, I would say it goes back to training. Certainly no one wants to do that. With what we knew had been going on, we talked through because I had 1 AIM-9 on my jet, so we talked through what we were going to do if the missile, if the missiles didn't arm, if they didn't detonate, if it didn't take the plane out. We talked about the scenarios about taking it out, ramming them and stuff like that. I think it just went back to just doing your job. This is what we're here for. If this is what we have to do, this is what we're going to do. And it was only, I'd say, after the fact, you start thinking about it. You go, all right, that was pretty nuts, because we talked about ramming the jets and what else we might have to do to bring them down, and certainly no one was looking forward to it. But I know that the guys I was flying with, no one would have hesitated either.
Yeah, not a spot you want to be in. And again, I think, as you already said, one, you guys aren't sitting alert, but there's some big things happening with getting those jets armed up, pulling out live missiles and getting those live missiles put on the jet. And if you're only getting one, or everyone only has one, big plane, like one missile might not take it down, so
Yeah.
again, having to again, ram it, like those thoughts of not only just having to shoot it down, but even like do something that's, completely outside of the tactics of taking down another plane is pretty wild.
It was very sobering. And I do remember after we got back expressing relief amongst ourselves that we didn't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
It was definitely a sobering moment.
You said you're on full-time mill leave because you're at an airline, one you're at still today, for a little over a year and a day, I think is what you said. But now let's talk about your career, kind of the military and the civilian side of it after 9/11 and how that's shaped. How did you end up on 16 years away on mill leave? What was going on during that time period? And
Right.
walk
So
me through that.
Yep. So a year and a day on the panel in the 7-2, and then that was the time. The airlines were hiring. Everybody was hiring, and you couldn't get guys to stay as full timers in the Guard because everyone wanted to go get a line number. We'd all seen the graphs about getting a line number versus waiting 2 or 3 years and what that meant to you. So, squadron commander asked me if I would come in. I was an IP, and he said, "Hey, we consider coming on mill leave?" And sure, I'll come back on mill leave for 3 years. So this was 2000, right before 9/11. So I'm on a 3-year mill leave. I took the 3-year bonus then, whatever that was. Then 9/11 happens, and I realized that I will not be furloughed. But I also realized if I was furloughed, I can stay on orders. They needed guys on orders. I can stay on orders. That doesn't count on your 5-year USERA time. So suddenly I realized I could probably get a 20-year retirement, an active duty retirement. And they needed guys full time. So
Yeah.
I think, so it came back in 2000, 9/11 hits 2001, 2003, I think my airline starts furloughing. I just do a voluntary furlough because they allowed guys to do that. And I did that stayed out on voluntary furlough till I had to come back. And then I came back off of voluntary furlough onto military leave again. So during that time frame, so from 2000 to 2016, I'm out away from the airlines. And during that time frame, I was in the fighter squadron. Like I said, we're sitting alert. We deployed. We had some great deployments. I guess we got everything Shaw wasn't getting. Yeah, we went to went to Australia for 3 weeks, and we go to Cape Thunder in Alaska, and we're having a grand old time. So, I put together a Key West deployment. Brought in McIntyre. McIntyre came down and met us down there. Brought in some Hornets from Oceania, and some. We still had some Tomcats in a test squadron somewhere that they brought in. So we had a huge DACT deployment at Key West, having a great time. Squadron commander, because I was a flight commander, I think OSS commander. And one day the wing commander calls me into his office and he says, "Hey, Deacon, I fired the CE squadron commander." Now I'd known this wing commander for years. I'd been a captain when he was a major. He was my weapons officer at Langley, and I'd helped him get hired in the unit. And anyway, I fired the CE squadron commander. Oh, that sucks. Or okay. And he just looks at me without saying anything. And then suddenly I realize what he's getting at. And I literally look over my shoulder like I'm an English major. And he says, "I'm not looking for an engineer. I'm looking for a leader. And I need your help." And I said, "Well, can I think about it?" He goes, "Yeah, but I need your answer tomorrow." So I don't know about you, Ray, but my guess is CE Squadron Commander wasn't on your dream sheet.
Turns out, yeah, you are a psychic, I believe.
Yeah, right. And so I talked to a mentor, and he said, "Deacon, there's a reason they say never turn down command." And then my pretty bride gave me some of the best advice that I got out of all of it, was she said, "I don't know enough about this to tell you what to do. You do what you think's right." She goes, "But if you go to sea, everybody in that squadron must believe that is your dream job. You can't go over there with an attitude. You can't go over there with a chip on your shoulder. They deserve better than that." And man, that was powerful. And not only powerful, it was right.
Yeah,
So
the fact that that had to be the way it had to be done. The fact that she said that's
Yeah.
be more spot on.
And I will tell you, Rain, it was probably the best thing ever happened to me in terms of leadership development because, you go from ops, mostly officers, few enlisted, all top-notch, sharp folks, type A, most of the time driven to succeed. In ops, you can largely manage or lead by giving desired end states and suspense. I want this done by this date. And for the most part, you turn around and that is done on this date and it's done well. Well, I went to CE and it's 3 officers and 62 enlisted. And they were all, they're looking for guidance. And I had some great NCOs and I had some not so great senior NCOs. And I quickly learned how critical that can be. So now I'm firing people and I'm learning things and I'm, learning about AFSCs and how to lead in a different way than I led at ops. And it was, I did it just for a year. We had, by the way, Hurricane Katrina came during that time frame. So guess who they looked to for infrastructure support during a hurricane on base? The CE squadron commander.
Imagine that was a busy time as a CE squadron commander.
They made me the J4 of the Joint Task Force on the Naval Air Station. I couldn't spell J4. What J4? What is that? That's Okay, that's logistics. Okay. The Army Guard from West Virginia had come down. And first of all, this was the Naval Air Station New Orleans was chaotic for a while after Katrina. I think it was the 7th busiest airport in the world for a while. We had, in the country for a while. We had pilots up in the tower directing traffic because the Navy had left. Right, they're federal. They close up shop and leave. We came back and literally cut the locks off the gate. I didn't, but airmen did. Cut the locks off the gate, opened stuff up, started landing airplanes, unload. We had pilots on, unloading C5s with the forklifts. It was just next man up, do what you need to get done.
Yeah.
And it was total chaos. And suddenly, as it starts to gel, now I'm the J4 in charge of logistics because I'm an English major. That makes sense. And this Army 05, I was an 05 at the time as well. His name was Larry Brown. And he always called me sir, even though I kept trying to tell him not to, but because he's a deputy J4 and I'm the J4, he calls me sir. I go, Larry, and he says, he goes, sir, would you like some help? Oh, yeah, Larry, I'd like some help. And he said, you're the fastest walking blind man I've ever seen in my life. And I thought, what a great line. Because I was everywhere all at once trying to get everything done. And he goes, you're about to hit a wall. And he came in and put a real logistics team together and helped out, But just being a part of that, having that responsibility, especially during Katrina, but learning the importance of the enlisted force, which we don't focus so much on in ops, as you well know, was absolutely a pivotal moment in my career, and I wouldn't change it for anything. It wasn't the funnest time in my career,
right?
But it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. It was very humbling, and a year later, I'm driving to Baton Rouge I forgot what I was going for, something for work. And the ATAG calls me and says, hey, where are you, Deacon? I said, well, sir, I'm on my way to Baton Rouge. He goes, well, turn around. You're the maintenance group commander now. Yes, sir. So I turned around on I-10 and went back, and I was maintenance group commander for 2 years. And again, it was fantastic. It was, learning that side of things. Now a bigger organization, 500 people organization, and I was just blessed to have just fantastic officers and senior enlisted that surrounded me, supported me, knew where my weak spots were, helped me through those. Someone said, staff your weaknesses, man. I'm a firm believer in that process. And these officers and senior enlisted that I worked with for 2 years were incredible. I had a phase 1 ORI, just what every pilot wants to do is run a phase 1 ORI from the maintenance side. Oh, by the way, this is during that time frame when the F-15 came apart midair.
Oh yeah.
Right. So now we've had to do we've been down for 4 months doing NDI inspections on airplanes, and also went from A models to C models. It was busy, and you know this. Brief 8, step 6, takeoff 4. You're not the most popular man on base when you're running the organization that's doing that.
Yeah.
So we had, I'll never forget it, Rain. We all had new jets. Most RA models, some guys have been working on the same plane for 15 years. They knew that plane like the back of their hand, and I know you've seen guys like that. Suddenly we have C models that we got from Katrina that had been a little bit beat up. The guys are learning them, and I'm sitting in my office scratching my head one day. Ops is breathing down my throat, and rightly so. My job is to deliver jets, generate jets, and we're not doing it. And I'm sitting in my office on the flight line, and I hear maintenance talking about when's this, and I call in the chief out there, and I said, look at this and tell me when we're going to have some jets to fly. I might have you 4 by Monday if we're lucky, maybe 6 by Tuesday. So then I call in the senior NCO that I trusted, hard-nosed. He was a little bit hard-nosed. Some guys didn't care for him because he was a little bit hard-nosed. And I said, Mark, look at this sheet and tell me what you can do with jets. He goes, I'll have you 8 by Monday. You'll have 10 on Tuesday, and you'll never drop it. You'll never drop another line. And so I made a command decision on the spot, called in the squadron commanders that we're firing this guy, we're putting this guy in. And, the thing I learned from that was we did not drop a sortie. That was one guy, senior NCO, that went in and took out a guy that had been in place for a while, but maybe not doing a very good job. And we did. It was just one change. One guy at a decisive point of impact made all the difference in the world.
But on that change, so here I'm gonna make some assumptions and based off what I've seen. One, I think it's cool, for lack of a better phrase. Like in the Guard, one, you have crew chiefs who literally accepted that jet as a senior airman.
Right.
And they've worked 20 years and they know that jet inside and out. That happens, depending on the unit and what planes are flying, that happens. So you have that level of expertise and that passion about that one particular jet, which is phenomenal. The other aspect now you've alluded to, the fact that you became the maintenance group commander. I agree with you. It's 100%, the active duty side, a lot of great leaders. I've had a lot of great bosses. I have seen it, and I know others have seen it. We have this career path on the active duty side that you get picked pretty early on, especially in the fighter pilot world, where you might be a senior captain, go into weapons school, or come back from weapons school. You kind of get put on that path. And again, this is a generalization, but often that is kind of the start of the leadership train to end up in the upper echelons. A lot of those guys are phenomenal leaders, and they work hard, they're super smart, and later down the career, they get there. But sometimes you get guys who are very tactically sound, but they can't lead themselves out of a wet paper bag.
Right.
And when you're in the fighter squadron, like you said, I think you that's a great way of phrasing it, right? Like you can lead yourself with just, this has to be done by this suspense date, and guys want to win, and they're going to get it done. Flip it over to like the maintenance group with 900 individuals, all sorts of backgrounds, hard workers, not hard workers, different skill sets, different problem sets. You're having to do some like real leadership in that. And when this kind of where I'm going with this is, I experienced that when I was doing demo because I had a little bit more. I had more integration with maintenance ops than I ever did as an ops line guy. And I saw the mentality of the guys who could get it done, to get it done the right way and deliver versus the ones who I'd say, again, CYA is probably not the right phrase, but they're worried about a different objective. They're answering to, hey, I got to keep this PowerPoint slide green. I'm measured on the percentages of, jets not breaking or whatever it might be. And by going to, if we do this, it's going to potentially, make a slide turn yellow, or they just don't. Maybe it's just misaligned objectives, right? Because it's requiring more work here, for whatever reason. But again, when you say, hey, firing this one person, I'm making the assumption it's kind of like that mentality of like, well, I don't know if it's like protecting their little kingdom over here. And if I just give you 6 jets, life is pretty comfortable and it's good enough. It's not going to get me in trouble, but The other
Right.
guy's like, we're going to do 8 and we're going to get you 10 the next day. That's the mentality, obviously, you want. So yeah, I guess a unique experience being a fighter pilot and doing the maintenance side, because you're seeing both worlds. While the objectives are aligned, ultimately, like get jets flying, like there are also sub objectives that are misaligned, I think.
Sure.
Sometimes.
Yeah, they absolutely are, and you're 100% right. Anything you report that you have to report upstream is going to become an incentive. It's going to become important to people. That's just human nature in the way it works. And I was just glad I remember I told the wing commander, who by that time was the guy who made me the C squadron commander. I went to his office and I said, "This is what I want to do. I want to make these changes." And he said, "Deacon, you're the group commander. It just better work. Your job's to generate jets." So
Simple.
Yeah, it was simple. And this guy's name was Mark Anderson. He retired years ago, but Mark Anderson, I don't think we dropped a line from that day. I don't think we dropped a line for as long as he was. I think he was pro super, I believe, and it was an immediate and noticeable change. And just he was just determined he was going to get it done.
But I don't want to gloss over the fact, because I appreciate, again, assumptions, how challenging it was in that time frame, going from the A model to the C model, and then again the plane breaking apart. I know that like mid part over America had a C. Was it a C model that snapped in half?
It was,
yeah. Which
I think it was. It could have been a D. I think it was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was pretty sure
D
it was a C, but it might have been a D model. But it was St. Louis, and it.
Okay.
Yeah, and we had to inspect every jet, NDI inspections on all of them. We had that, new jets, new commander. Jet falls apart. We got a phase 1 coming up. We had 2 suicides, within just a couple months. So it was a handful. We were juggling. We were juggling a lot. Learned a lot. And again, I'll say those officers that were at my side, Romy Galloway, Jesse Hassenkamp, Iggy Asaf, at my side, giving support, advice. It wasn't always advice, always heated, but at least they felt safe enough to give me their advice. Yeah. And then I had two chiefs, Randy Volpe and Jimmy Downing, who also, I made them feel safe enough to tell me what they thought. I made it okay to disagree, which I thought was important, because we've all had leaders where it wasn't okay to disagree.
Yeah. I feel like you always want to be the boss that hopefully someone tells you you're not wearing underwear, right? And the king's not wearing underwear. They're like, don't let me. But not everyone's that way.
I had an exec tell me that, this is a quote, "Sir, we're about to do a award ceremony inside because the rain was bad. So you know how that is. You're up close saluting." And she said, "Sir, your breath would melt polished steel." I've been having coffee all morning long, and she brought me in some breath mints. I go, okay, fair enough. That's who you want.
It is who you want. Tell me I got something in my teeth, right? Don't let me just go find it 15 minutes later when I look in the mirror like, man, I really wish, So it's just tough conversations to have. Hats off. You said she did it. So hats off to her for having the courage to do that.
Carlin Sladen was her name. She was my exec, and it was one of those things. I always felt like it was my job to. I'd have great execs, but I wanted to move them on to get them out, and not just. Would have loved to keep her for myself to take care of stuff, because such a great job. But she moved on to be a squadron commander, and that's what I did after maintenance group for 2 years. Then I took over the fighter wing after that. Right before ORI, got to be maintenance group commander before the phase 1. And then wing commander before get that, 7 months, I think 8 months before phase 2, something like that. And then did that for 4 years.
Yeah, I don't think we mentioned ORI, operational readiness inspection. They changed the flavors, and phase 1, phase 2, just different requirements, different inspection levels. But all of them, regardless of what they are, like no one's looking forward to it. It's just a lot of prep, a lot of pain. And usually, you just got people breathing down your neck and evaluating everything you do. Like it's just not a fun time.
It's a break even at best, and we had not had one in 15 years because we had we had one planned for 2001 that was canceled or 2002 canceled because of 9/11, rescheduled for 2006, canceled because of Katrina. So we had not had one since 95, I think it was, something like that. By the time we hit it, it'd been 15 years. And I took the wing maybe a year before the phase 2. But,
Gosh, yeah, good deals. Good deal. No good deed goes unpunished, right?
Right.
Well, as we're kind of getting long in the tooth here, and as we start to wrap up, will hope you'll be willing to hang around for a There I Was story. But two, this kind of segues, the latter part of your career, you spent a lot of time in some key leadership roles. I know you've written a book. And I would like to dive in. The one question I generally always ask guys, right? Like if you found 15, 16-year-old Deacon walk on the street, is there any advice you would give to him? Tell him to do something different or change anything in particular?
I think if this is a kid that's wanting to be a pilot or wanting to be in the military, I think my advice would be, first of all, never give up. And honestly, that's the reason I wrote this book. And look, this book's not a moneymaker for me. It's truly a way that I'm trying to find to give back, because I know you run into kids who they don't think it's a possibility. They just don't understand that aviation is even a thing for. They think you have to be an astronaut or know a senator or whatever it is. And I've mentored so many kids who just didn't think it was even an option for them. And I have had such an incredible career. I'm winding mine down. I'm 63 almost. We'll be winding mine down, and I've been able to see things and do things and go places, and just like you have, and I just feel so incredibly humbled by the opportunities I've gotten. Because we all know, at least I know guys that were better pilots than me, smarter than me, that just weren't at the right place at the right time. And you mentioned even, 2 more years now I'm banked. 2 years earlier and now they're not hiring. I kind of hit some key gates. Providence, luck, you tell me what it is, but I hit them. And I want them to know that this is a possibility. That, don't give. I had some medical issues that I had to fight my way through from the beginning. I had just a long shot of never having flown. So that's what I tell these, because I do some mentoring now. I go to schools and I'm trying to make sure that these kids know that aviation is a possibility, and is the only reason to stop is because you don't want to do this, right? And even then, I would give them some advice my dad gave me. I went up to officer training school. He says, "Son, you're going to get there, and it's going to be different. Someone's going to be yelling at you. You're going to get homesick." He goes, "Do not come home. Absolutely do not come home. You stay there. If you want to quit, you quit on graduation day."
Yeah.
And you know what? I got there and I was a little bit homesick and missed my girlfriend, and the guy's yelling at me, and
it's not fun.
This is not as much fun as I imagined. But stuck it out, and he was right. On graduation day, you couldn't have pried me out of what I was doing with a crowbar, and that's really the advice I would give to the young kid, is just keep trying. It is. Don't give up until you decide this is not what you want to do.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And like a testament, obviously the timing worked out. We've had a lot of people on here who, they've shared their story of like it's medical, it's delays, whatever it might be. I think in the end, if you want this enough, there's a path, right? I mean, maybe there's the one-off, like you have a heart condition and it's just like, unfortunately, there's no way around this medically, right? But I mean, there are a lot of ways there are a lot of different paths to land in a cockpit, whether it just be straight civilian or in the military, and you just gotta press forward. Again,
the top ophthalmologist in the Air Force. So I was going in to write Pat with a continuing eye problem, and he literally said to me, "How did you ever get in the Air Force?" Because we would never let you in today. Yeah,
Great.
Because the standards were just different then than they are now. He was laughing. He was just laughing as he's signing off my paperwork to go back flying. But there's an awful lot of waivers for an awful lot of things.
Yeah, super helpful, like you said early on too, having a mentor, right? Someone to
absolutely.
And nowadays with the internet, social media, I mean, it makes it, I think, so much easier to either find other people who've kind of walked this path or someone to kind of guide you. So having a mentor out there is definitely a huge piece of it, I think.
One of the things that I did in the book, I put my email in it, and at the very end of the book, I put, here's the bonus for having read to the end. If you need a mentor, you absolutely need one. If you can't find one, look me up. And as it's been gratifying to see as because I'm starting to get those emails now from people. In fact, I have a call scheduled for after we get off of this podcast with a 40-year-old dude that wants to go be an airline pilot. And yeah, get a mentor, be a mentor. Absolutely.
100%. Deacon, I appreciate you taking the time today. Look forward for a There I Was story, and I'll see you over there in just a minute. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. You bet.
15,000, I'll give you some of that.